Eli Campbell here. One thing that makes Steamboat special is how many awe-inspiring people call our valley home. You could find yourself in line at the coffee shop next to an Olympian, or sitting on the gondola next to the founder of a world-renowned business. Our community produces and attracts the best of the best in their respective fields, but most are so humble about it you would never know. These extraordinary people are the common folk in the boat. Welcome to Common Folk in the Boat. Eli Campbell here with you alongside Dave Whitlinger from Billo Premium Cannabis. How are you doing?
I couldn't be better.
Yeah, it's going to be a great day.
I like what you've done with the
place.
It's
a little different. It's we've changed things up a little bit here. A lot of changes, actually. We're at a new location, recording at Dusky Grouse. We've got a new platform that we're working on, that we're being presented on, I suppose, with the Steamboat Locals app. And Billo has been really supportive of everything that we're doing, and so wanted to say thank you for.
Well, of course. I mean, it wasn't a hard decision. Obviously, we are always interested in supporting local just as much as you are. And boy, Eli, when you told us about this whole Steamboat Locals and what you're doing with the radio and the website and the app and all the things, it didn't really take a whole lot to get us going. So kudos to you. This is fantastic. I think we're thrilled at what you're up to.
Yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm really encouraged by a lot of the positive reactions I've gotten from the community, creating a space for the community to kind of come together in a positive way. And I think that really speaks to what we've been doing on the Common Folk podcast, talking to the influential people have made this community as special as it is. But there's so many stories and so many ways to tell them, whether it's through music or through podcasts, through blogs. And I think that's what we're hoping to do with the Steamboat Locals app and the website, is have it all available to the community. And, Billo does a lot with the community as well. I suppose this is what you're high on this week, or at least I'm going to throw those words into your mouth.
Yes, it's very much what we're high on this week. And I just shake my head wondering, how am I here? I'm just along for the ride.
You've been influential in this community, for a long time.
Sure.
Some people may not know it. Diamond Dave Witt on the late night airwaves back in the early 2000s.
Oh, let's not talk about that. Those are certain things we'll just sweep under the carpet.
Yeah.
Those days. Yeah,
we've got actually someone here today that we're going to be talking to who, I hate to say it, but maybe has a little bit more influence than David Whitlinger in this community. The family name is spread out across Steamboat, and the impact is felt by every single person that lives here. We were talking to Jay Fetcher, who he just makes me feel so happy every time I ever have had a chance to talk to him. So really excited to have him join us here today.
Absolutely.
We will be right back with Jay Fetcher on Common Folk in the Boat. Welcome back. We are incredibly excited to be joined by a man whose smile is infectious and whose name is well known across the Yampa Valley. Jay Fetcher, how are you doing?
Good, Eli. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you for joining us. Now, as I said, the Fetcher name is well known. We're sitting here at Dusky Grouse, just a stone's throw from Fetcher Pond, and well beyond the pond is your name influential here in town.
The pond used to be a sewer lagoon. So,
and what was a sewer lagoon?
It's where all the quote unquote stuff came down from the ski area before it was tapped into the city system. So stuff floated out there.
It'll make you think twice before you start paddleboarding out there.
You don't want to know too much more than that.
Yeah, I mean, that's where I learned to roll a kayak, and now I'm wondering about that.
Nice.
Well, before we get into the Fetcher influence here in town, I'd just like to know the story of how the Fetchers came to Steamboat, because it was really your father who kind of gave up on a different lifestyle back east to come out to Steamboat.
Yes. And it truly, Eli, it makes me go and have moments of awe when I think about what they did. Because my dad was born and raised in Chicago, went to Harvard, got a master's degree in engineering. He actually, after he graduated, he got a job with a company in Philadelphia called the Bud Company. And when he was 12, actually, his family took him to Europe for 3 years. So this was in 1924.
Oh, wow.
And they would live there for 3 years. And so they lived in Switzerland and France, and that's where he developed a passion for skiing, but he also learned French really well. So after Harvard, the company needed a representative for their company in Paris, so they sent him over there. And he actually, while he was there, he had went to the 1936 Berlin Olympics. He's in the stadium with Hitler.
Wow.
He didn't see Jesse Owens run, but he was during that time incredible. And also the other thing he did while he was over there is he patented and made stainless steel skis. This is in 1937, and we have a French patent for metal skis.
Oh my
And do you get to claim any royalties on that still?
Those in
I only
production
wish.
today.
Yeah.
And he made them over there, and part of his skill was learning. And this is, in the 30s when it was hard to weld stainless steel. So that's when he did over in Paris, is develop the ability to weld with stainless steel. Then he came back. Again, part of the interesting story is that we have all these letters at home where he wrote his parents who lived in Chicago. And one of the letters says, I'm amazed at what's going on in Germany in the 30s, how the youth is so energized by what Hitler was doing. And his dad wrote him back, and he said, "You get your butt home now," because he was concerned about how my dad was getting sucked into this.
Yeah.
My grandfather knew better. Excuse me. So came back. Philadelphia continued to work for the Bud Company. My mom grew up in Plainfield, New Jersey, went to Smith College. They had known each other because of the overlap between the men at Harvard and the women at Smith. So they had known each other in their college years. They got married in 1943, lived in Philadelphia, started having kids. My oldest brother, Ned, was born in 1944. My Bill was born in 1946, and I was born in 1947, so three little boys in a hurry.
Yeah.
My theory is, because my dad liked to build things, I think that he was maybe being asked to move from building stuff for the Bud Company with his hands to go into management. So in May of 49, he said, "I'm going to be a rancher." And he didn't know which end of a cow got up first.
Dave, do you know which end of a cow gets
I've,
up first?
I've since learned, off camera, I've been educated quite a bit. So thank you, Eli. To you?
Studying the cows as they lie out in the field.
Yeah.
So he came west, shopped for ranches, Gunnison, Saratoga, Montana. Bought this place in August, and we were here in October. And I do think one of the draws for this place was Hollison Hill, because of his passion for skiing.
Yeah.
And so we were here in October, and, truthfully, the hero of the story is my mom, because she arrived here from downtown Philadelphia and country clubs to Clark, Colorado, with 3 little boys under 5. And she loved it.
That's unbelievable. I mean, I have 2 young kids, and just, traveling from here to Denver with the modern luxuries of screens and things like that, and it's still hard enough to figure that out.
Yeah.
And traveling across country with 3 young boys to a place you don't know anything about, and it must have been a real lifestyle change for your dad and for your mom.
And, you living in Clark at the ranch, you went to town once a month, if you were lucky, because in the winter the roads are barely plowed.
Yeah.
The Clark store was there, so to buy some of the essentials. And, I when I was more grown up, I asked my mom, how did she do this? How did she put up with that switch? How did she put up with John Fetcher? And she said, I'm a Quaker. Everything's better the next day.
Everything's going to be better tomorrow.
Words to live by.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whenever you're having a bad day, always think that tomorrow is going to be better.
And, it was truly remarkable. And the other half of the story is that he came out with his brother and their family as partners. So that's why you see signs that say Fetcher Brothers.
Yeah.
My uncle left the partnership in 1962, mainly because the ranch truly wasn't big enough financially to support both families. I think that Stanton Fetcher really didn't enjoy the physical work of the ranch. Again, a theory, I'm not sure. So he left in 1962 and moved to St. Paul. He actually worked for Anselm Keyes, who was one of the first researchers in diet or cholesterol, heart issues.
Yeah, and did some pretty famous studies up there.
Yeah.
Some that were good and some were controversial, I know.
Yes.
But back to your family and now recruiting his family, your dad recruiting his brother to move out to Northwest Colorado, rural area. What were some of the reactions of their friends and people that knew them well?
Oh, again, good question, and very fortunate that my mom's father was still in New Jersey, and she would write every 2 weeks a 2-page typewritten letter to her father about what was going on the ranch. And we have all those, and just great stories, and some of them maybe shouldn't be repeated. and my dad liked to keep a little red book. Wasn't much of a diary. He'd write snow today or 8 calves born, stuff like that. And so I'm going through these diaries that truly go back to 1936 when he was in Paris, just trying to pull out more significant notes from those. And so I read June 3rd, 1952, cut Jay's finger off.
Oh, wow. And that's all it says is just cut.
Did he sketch it?
Yeah. I was 4 years old. I was out in the field with him with a machine and stuck my finger in the wrong place. He moved a letter, pushed it off. I made the diary.
You made the diary just as a note, though.
Yeah, not even that got more than 2 sentences, right?
Well, truly, underneath it are notes of the rest of the work he did.
Kept going, had more cows.
Didn't get as much done because I had to stitch a finger.
Right. He took me to a neighbor's, and she drove me down to Mom, and Mom took me into town.
Wow.
But it's the most useless finger you have.
I suppose on the right hand, yeah.
Anyway, so I think truly the ranch struggled financially. The original owner of the ranch, along with the one at Hans Peak and the one across the river, was a man named J.E. Barbie, and he was kind of the first deep pocket rancher in Routt County. He was the founder of a Vanity Fair magazine and clothing business in Philadelphia.
It's funny how all these folks are making their wealth in the East, and then they're deciding to pack it up and head west. I love that theme.
It's a similar story today still, too.
Yeah, that's true.
And the original ranch was about 700 acres at Clark and about 1,500 acres up near Hunts Peak, the town of Hunts Peak. And it was a struggle, mainly because of quite a bit of difference between, even though it's only 8 miles between the environment in Clark and the environment at Hunts Peak, and all the cows for the ranch had to be up at the Hunts Peak place because everything at the Clark place had to be hayed in order to keep them through the winter. My dad and I, again, theory is I think he wanted to scratch that engineering itch. So he got involved with the ski area, developing of the ski area. Partnered with Jim Temple. Jim deserves full credit for the vision of this area, but Jim struggled, I think, with the business side of it and maybe somewhat the engineering side of it. So my dad helped with those pieces of it. The ranch, in the same time that my uncle was leaving the partnership, my dad was trying to build the Christie Lift. He drove our cattle truck to San Diego to pick up the bull wheels for the Christie Lift.
Wow.
And,
And I think a story that not a lot of people know, especially as we're getting into the summer lake recreation season, the old ranch that we're talking about is now Steamboat Lake, and the story of how it became Steamboat Lake, but not only how it became Steamboat Lake, but Steamboat Lake really paved the way for the Steamboat Ski Resort to become what it is. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I think I know I have the records, I just need to dig in them more, that the ranch was financially very tied to the ski area. So, he'd take a load of cows to Denver to make payroll for the ski area. This is just when only the Christie Lift was built. So the ranch was financially very tied to the ski area, and I think he saw the danger of what could happen to the ranch. And so he promoted the building of Steamboat Lake on top of our ranch up there. Tried hard to get the interest in it. Finally, the Division of Wildlife, that was before they became the Division of Parks and Wildlife, agreed. So in 1967, they bought our property up there, built a dam. Once he had that money from that land, he went to Switzerland, bought the first gondola, the Bell Gondola. And that put Steamboat on the map. And then he got out from under it and basically saved the ranch. And he would say that Steamboat Lake built this ski area.
It's incredible, not just saving the ranch, but building a ski resort and doing it in a way where, if I'm not mistaken, part of the agreement was that the ranch land would only be used as a recreational area. Right. So it was promoting recreation up on the ski mountain, but also with the land that he had once owned.
Good point, Eli, because it's called Steamboat Lake, not Steamboat Reservoir, because there's no reserved water rights in it. Unlike Stagecoach Reservoir, which has reserved water rights, which people can draw down. So it's a recreational lake. And actually, I think it's the second busiest state park in the state after Cherry Creek in Denver.
Wow. And recreation has been an important part of your family for a long time, but as has conservation. Speaking of water rights, can you talk a little bit about that as well?
He got very involved in water issues. He was the manager of the Upper Yampa Conservancy for years, he was the motivation behind Stagecoach Reservoir. And he liked to see what water could do, whether it was grow grass for beef or whether it could make electricity through Stagecoach. And I remember him saying when they did Steamboat Lake, it took 1 year and 1 permit. Stagecoach took 10 years and 40 permits to get done.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It is.
Well, we have been talking a lot about your dad, but I do want to ask you, you moved here when you were 2 years old.
Right.
And so, for all intents and purposes, your whole life has been in Steamboat, or what you remember.
Right.
And, Steamboat at that time, as we've talked about, was a ranching community. And I think that there's a lot of ski resorts in Colorado that were originally mining communities that have turned into ski resorts. Steamboat a little different, being a ranching community. And I'd like to know from your perspective how that has played into what the community is now, and what you kind of see from, a lot has changed, but what you might see from your younger days in Steamboat that still kind of lives in today's culture.
And I think back of growing up in Clark, walking the 2 miles to the Clark School, sharing with those other rural neighbors that were there, learning from them, learning how to shoot a .22. And that was deep, strong memories. And I think as Steamboat evolved into more resort-oriented than ranching-oriented, there was some issues. Personally, I'm grateful for what Steamboat has to offer. I think that my wife and I would have struggled to be in more of a Wyoming cow town than what we have to share in Steamboat. And I think my daughters, too, have valued the different friendships they can make with the different type of people. I do think that we have to use our thinking about where the community is now and not focus and call it what really is, which is a natural resource-based economy, which includes the recreation, includes the ranching, includes all the environment. And if we keep that in mind, rather than we're resort here and we're ranching here, we're all in this together, I think that's what we need to think about.
And I think that you've done a really good job with trying to not just teach that and talk about it yourself, but passing it along to younger generations. You have an incredible property still up at Steamboat Lake called, it's your ranch, but you use part of it for the reading ranch with BookTrails.
Right.
And my son has been a part of that program in the past, where he gets to do a week away. It's just a gorgeous property. They live under the stars. They're really seeing the environment and spending time understanding the natural resources around them. What has been Reading Ranch, really meant to you, being part of building that?
When I kind of think back of the start of that, it goes way back, because we used to host square dances at our barn up there with the Perry Mansfield group. This is in the 50s.
Yeah.
And so since then we've shared that. But I think another piece of that is how that land touches our heart. And so in 1993, we, as a family, agreed to put a conservation easement on that ranch, which means that it would never be developed. We got a small IRS benefit from doing that. But that drew attention statewide, nationwide, and I approached the Colorado Cattlemen's Association about forming a land trust, which they did in 1995. And that's, I think, Eli, goes back to our passion for sharing that resource. Since then, we've done lots of things. And you mentioned BookTrails, which is Emily developing this camp for kids. She came to us and said, I'd like to get kids out on properties, reading books, understanding what's going on. Do you have a place? And we said, well, we got this old homestead, but the homesteader died there and was there 3 weeks before anybody found him. But go look at it.
I won't tell my son that part of it because he might be scared to go back.
It's a good story. Yeah. I mean, we're talking about reading and stories.
It was winter, so he was preserved.
He was preserved.
And it's, we call it the Burnett Place after him. And we try, and all our pastures on the ranch are named after the homesteaders. We try to honor those homesteaders. And I can give you a list of the other philanthropic stuff we've shared, which is so rewarding. And, I was honored to work for Senator Mark Udall as the area representative here for 6 years. And I was, again, lucky enough to take him up there one day to this BookTrails site. And the kids were running around. They didn't know who he was. And he was just in awe, watching the kids run around. And as we left, he said, those kids will be environmental voters forever. And that, to me, is what getting those kids outside. And that's why we work with Emily and develop that BookTrails site. Hopefully your kids will benefit from that.
They have benefited from it for sure, and I think it's not just my kids; it's a lot of people that have benefited from that, and just the idea of how important in your family and what has been taught from your dad through you and the further generations of the importance of not just conservation but also recreation. But when you get people out recreating outdoors, it really leads to that sense of how special the natural resources are. And I'm sure that's one of the motivating factors for the Reading Ranch and everything else that you do.
We have the Rocky Mountain Youth Corps has their summer rendezvous there. We have the Steamboat Bike Race has come through there. Emerald Mountain School camped up there. And, it's perfect. It's perfect. Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts. Yeah. And I think, quickly back to my history on the ranch. Excuse me, when I finished at the University of Wyoming and came home, I was, in a way, lucky compared to my peers because my dad was, again, building a ski area. And so I didn't have that patriarch looking over my shoulder saying, you're doing this all wrong. And I had freedom to make decisions I thought were good for the ranch. And that's what kept me there.
Yeah.
Having that freedom.
And now it's, you're no longer there, but you've had, your children working it, your grandchildren have spent a lot of time there. I'm sure it's really special for you to see your grandchildren now playing in the same fields and climbing the same trees that you probably did when you were their age.
And, we don't have immediate family on the ranch, but we have 2 young women who are the managers, and they're incredible. And they do a lot better than boys. You might want to edit that one out.
Oh, no.
But they do. No. They just are incredible at what they do. And I am involved barely, which is just fine. As my new expression is, I go for joy, not jobs.
Yeah.
And it's wonderful. So. So
Well, and I think one of the amazing things that we've talked a lot about too is how you've invited the people onto your ranch. And you were talking about the Steamboat Gravel Race, and I think that there has been some definitely a hot topic of all of these bikers coming and using these ranch roads. You've been on the other end of inviting the people to see that part of the race. I know that Dave has done the race before. We both worked on that race before, and I think for everyone involved, even though it is only about a 2-mile section, it is probably the most special section of the event. And when you have 3,000 people coming from all over the world, and that's the part that they remember, it's your land that they're going to remember.
and you know, there's nothing like a little cow manure up the back of your shirt. when they ride through those pastures.
You know, nothing makes me ride faster than trying to get away from a bad smell, even if it's attached to me.
It's true.
And
It's true.
and admittedly, the bike race doesn't impact us the way it does some of our neighbors, because we're off the road a little bit, and then when they go through the pasture up there, it's very minor. So I have sympathy for some of my neighbors that are much more impacted. But for us, it's just it's a chance to share. And, you know, as they come through the ranch and they stop and they're getting a drink or whatever, using the bunkhouse for the bathroom, whatever, and they look around and they say, "This is amazing. What do you do here? Why is this place look the way it is?" And it's a real chance to share.
Yeah.
My regret so far is not getting Reggie Miller to dunk his basketball in front of the barn.
Yeah.
Can I just inject, because I remember, you know, as Eli said, I worked on that race one year, and I was in a van and it was hot, and I pulled up near your barn there where there was the rest stop, and I found a shady spot, and that's when you and I really first got to know each other. And we're both in the shade, and I remember vividly about just sitting there looking up at this beautiful property and all of these excited bike racers, et cetera, and just thinking how lucky, and I wasn't even riding the race that year, I was just part of but how lucky we were that you were opening your doors, so to speak, to us, and how special that is. And you gloss over it really well, Jay, in that, oh yeah, we do this and this and this. But I think it's worth stating that you guys, your whole family, has been so welcoming in general and sharing this wonderful property. And that doesn't happen all the time. So it's really unique, and I just think that's worth really noting here.
Thank you. And like I said, I don't think we in agriculture are real good at messaging. And so this is a way to share and to look at those cows out there and say, you know, they're doing just fine. They aren't ruining the environment yet.
Yeah. Well, it's, you know, you are incredibly progressive in allowing people to enjoy and really share in what is a special piece of land for you and your family. And as you've seen so much change over the years in this community, I kind of want to end with a couple comments and conversation about what you'd like to see for Steamboat and the community in generations ahead. You know, you've provided us with a photo of 1967, I believe, Steamboat, where the only thing that you can see is one tiny little building at what would be the corner of Highway 40 and Mount Warner Road, which you've told us was a bowling alley that turned into a nightclub, and the rest is nothing.
He met us.
Yeah, I can't imagine why they put a bowling alley that far away from everything else.
It's a bit popular back then.
Yeah,
so
I mean,
popular,
and little did they probably know that would turn into a Walmart. But you know, you look at that and see where we were 60 years ago, a little under 60 years ago, and the town keeps progressing at a rapid rate. Yeah. What do you think is important for us to remember and to hold on to as we continue to move forward?
Challenging. I do think we are really lucky here in this valley, because we're not Vail, we're not Aspen, we were a agricultural town first, and there's still recognition of that. And I think about the start of the Community Ag Alliance, and that was a way to get these different visions to talk to each other. The resort vision versus the agriculture vision. That's where Community Ag Alliance came from, and it's still working that way. It's bringing the ability to have local food and interaction and talking about it. I go back again to when we did our easement on the ranch, and then we approached the Routt County commissioners. I know Ben Bell is on the commission. I can't think who else. And we approached them and said, look, in Clark, we forever protected our land. Can we get support from the county? And out of that grew the Routt County Open Lands Plan, which is remarkable. And it's copied all across Colorado because of what we did. So, truthfully, it's a little bit harder to drive to Clark than it would, not necessarily Clark, but to drive through Steamboat than it used to be.
Yeah.
Because in downtown Steamboat, we used to buy our tractors. Now you buy T-shirts.
Yeah.
So those are changes that I get my head around.
Yeah.
And it's fine. We have better restaurants than we did than the El Rancho way back when. So things like that are good.
Yeah. I mean, change is inevitable, and I think there's a way to evolve and progress in a positive way.
Yes.
I think that you, and with what you've done, trying to teach the recreation, conservation, what you've done with Reading Ranch, everything we've talked about is trying to certainly preserve a slower type of change, or a more well thought out version for it. So,
and truthfully, I have a little bit of my dad in me, in that I like what I consider production versus service. Versus the ranch produces something, Stagecoach produces something. The ski area is a service. And it's, I know what it does, but it's still, there's more of a production mentality that I have.
Well, I, for one, can say thank you to the Fetcher family for everything that you have produced here. As I said, it's a name that is well known, but the idea of our podcast is that you could be sitting in a coffee shop like Dusky Grouse and not know the person that's sitting next to you, comes from such a long line of influential people that built the ski area, that built Steamboat Lake, that turned a sewage.
You could be bombing down Heavenly Days on your stainless steel skis and not know that the patent holder has ties to Routt County.
I wish we had those.
Yeah.
Skied on them once and bent them and threw them.
Yeah. Well, but the patent still exists.
I was going to bring you a copy.
Sell it for $1.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Jay Fetcher, just another common folk in the boat.
Oh.